In this episode of the Comics Industry Commentary, we're going to look at the impact of Neal Adams, the evolution of Frank Miller, and the lessons that we can all learn from Twitter. My name's Gamal Hennessy, and I'm an attorney, author, and business consultant who specializes in the comic book industry. So I'm going to give my perspective on the business's top stories of the week. And the first story actually happened right before I started recording, and the Hollywood Reporter announced that Neal Adams, the seminal, iconic comic book creator who brought characters like Batman, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, and many characters in the superhero genre into the modern age, passed away at the age of 80 this week. They actually have a very good quote that I wanted to read from the Hollywood Reporter article. It says, in addition to helping define comic book icons like Batman, Adams worked tirelessly to promote better working conditions and creators' rights, especially for their work. He early on recognized the value of creators and was a thorn in the side of publishers, demanding compensation for himself and others when their characters were adapted off the page. So for everyone who's actually trying to get a deal with a Netflix or with a Sony and get some financial participation in that deal, you have Adams to thank for that, because before him, there was very little participation for artists and writers. And even though there's still a long way to go in that kind of equitable distribution of media rights, it was Adams who was one of the people who paved the way for the progress that we've made so far. So much respect to him for all the work that he did on and off the comic book page. Moving to another industry icon who helped redefine a lot of major characters, Frank Miller announced this week that he is launching an independent publishing imprint called Frank Miller Presents, where he is going to be actually publishing some of his own work and work of up-and-coming artists. Now, this deal was actually, or this project was actually being developed for quite some time. He's brought in executives from DC to help run the business end, and together with his creative influence and their business influence, this seems to be well positioned to give Mr. Miller a hat trick. Because if this project goes well, that means he would have been very successful as a freelance artist, working for characters like Wolverine and Batman. He would have been successful as a creator-owned artist when he did things like 300 and Sin City. And if this project does well, that's the hat trick. There are no other direct forms of comic book business models that he hasn't actually influenced. So now it remains to be seen whether his name still has the cachet in the direct market and in the bookstore market to move units to actually allow him to capture market share. But if anybody can do it, it is likely that he can. The third piece of news that we're going to talk about is something that everybody's been talking about this week, and that is the purchase of Twitter and it going from a public corporation to a private corporation. Now, this story has actually prompted people to talk about things like free speech and billionaires buying up the world and the fall of democracy and a lot of other things. We're not here to talk about any of those things. We're here to talk about specifically the impact it will have on comics and what you can actually learn from this move. And I think the purchase of Twitter, just like the move to blockchain or the potential move to blockchain by Kickstarter or the undermining of democracy by Facebook, all raise issues related to the concept of what's called digital sharecropping. Now, digital sharecropping is when you build a content platform in a space that you do not actually own. So let's say you have 1 million followers on Twitter. You don't actually have 1 million followers on Twitter. You have access to potentially up to 1 million people, and Twitter gives you that access. They can take away that access at any time. If you read the terms and conditions of any one of these social platforms, and you probably didn't because most people don't, when they join the social platform, it's very clear that you do not actually have unlimited or unfettered access to that space. So building a business on YouTube or on Kickstarter or on any other platform is precarious to the extent that all of your digital eggs are in one basket. The key to getting around digital sharecropping is twofold. One, if you diversify your media, social media access, if you diversify how your business functions, then the loss of any access to any one platform will not completely destroy your business. You will simply shift your efforts to the other platforms that you have available to you. The other thing that is stronger, but takes longer time to do, is to actually work to control the space yourself. That means driving all the traffic from all your social media activity to a space that you own, which in most cases is going to be your website. It means actually capturing the names and email addresses of everyone in your community, both on the consumer side and the collaborative side, the people that you're working with, so that if suddenly Facebook disappears, you're still in business because you're just going to shift. Now that takes a longer time to do, especially if you're talking about not digital sharecropping on something like Kickstarter, where a lot of your business might be, but it's not an impossible feat if you look at things like what Iron Circus has recently been able to do with their move to go off of Kickstarter. Now, that is a unique case because they've been building that business for about a decade, but it's something that I think everybody should be striving for if you're going to be building a business in comics. And it doesn't matter if you're a freelancer, creator-owned artist, independent publisher, licensing, investing, whatever. The more that you can actually prevent digital sharecropping in your business, the better off you'll be. So that is my perspective on the three major news stories this week. If you think there was another story that I missed that you'd like to comment on, you can leave it in the comments. If you have any thoughts or feelings about Adams, about Miller, about the Twitter thing and its impact on comics, comment below. If you'd like to actually be part of the broader and deeper conversations that the Comics Publishing Institute has about all of these topics and a lot of other things related to the business and legal side of comics, I will put a link to that organization down in the comments, down in the show notes, along with links to all the stories that I talked about. So that's it for this week. We'll see you next week. And until then, have fun with your